Welcome to TUSB Conversation Starters. If you have been listening to us over the last few weeks, we have been speaking to experts across tech, wellness, D&I, and more on the key trends that businesses need to focus on in 2022. Today, we are specifically addressing C-suite executives and business leaders with leadership mentor Bharat Wakhlu. Bharat has coached and mentored hundreds of senior leaders throughout his career, enabling them to reach their full potential. We asked him about the most pressing challenges for leaders in 2022 and the critical skills they will need to lead in a world that continues to be in a state of flux. Here's the conversation. Bharat, let me just straight away get into the question which I'm thinking is that you are a leadership coach and a mentor. How do you see the role of leaders evolving in the last 2 years amidst the change which we have seen? And if you keep your concentration on the remote working aspect, which has also stepped in.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Danish. It's wonderful to be on this podcast, and thank you for starting off with a question that's been burning on everyone's minds for quite a while now. Let me start off by saying that the fundamental actions, approaches, and elements of leadership, those have not changed. And they won't change much because, quite honestly, in fact, I wrote about this in my book on total quality many years ago. Performance excellence demands that the elements of leadership, the 6 E's of leadership, which I like to emphasize every time, those won't change. And you might say, what are these 6 E's? The 6 E's really are: a leader has to, number one, ensure that he or she exposes the need for change. That's the first E. The second E is that the leader has to then envision the kind of future that's to be created. The third is one has to enlist others, engage with them, making sure that they're part of the larger picture and are committed to reaching that new vision that's been articulated. Then they have to be empowered and encouraged. And finally, the leader has to exemplify the kind of behaviors that everybody has to pursue or follow by personal action. So these 6 will not change. But something has definitely changed as a result of the pandemic. And while all these elements will remain in play, what has now happened is that people in the organization, because of the fact that they're not all working in the same places, they're scattered, they're working in hybrid conditions, and they're not always engaging with their managers and supervisors, there is a need to reinforce each of these 6 E's consciously and deliberately. Now, for instance, in the pre-pandemic days, Danish, there used to be a situation where the chief human resource executive or the HR manager would take a large part of the encouraging role or the empowering role, making sure that people understand that what's going on, they're engaged with the organization. But in today's day, I think every single manager has to play the role of an HR executive. You don't have the liberty now to say that, oh, the HR guy is going to do this, because that person is no longer in touch with everybody. But your immediate supervisor has to ask you, how are things going on? Are you getting the kind of support you need? Is everything all right? Just checking out on people. And a lot of people did do that during the pandemic. I think that has to become one of the important norms, especially as you rightly pointed out, as we get into this remote working concept. People are really feeling disconnected with the mothership, and therefore it's all the more reason that everybody takes on upon himself or herself the responsibility of connecting with everybody else. And that's how you reinforce the values, the mission, the purpose of the organization, and that will enable everybody to take bold initiatives to deliver value to customers, ensure that the talent is properly managed, because talent, as you also know, is not a big deal these days. People aren't willing to commit to organizations where they don't feel valued. So all this, Danish, is going to play into the future of enterprise, and you will notice
But I'm
that
just
everybody has to be part of all this.
I'm just thinking, right? The situation which you've put out, the six E's, they are applicable no matter what. Is it
Yes,
pre-pandemic or you are in the pandemic or after the pandemic is over,
absolutely, yes.
right? But in this situation, for example, let's say in an organization, new colleagues have joined and you haven't interacted with them. Uh, the only way you see them is the way you and I are recording the podcast, right? There's a screen on your laptop. These are three, four bubbles there. You look at them, you um, speak to them, and that's it, right?
Absolutely.
Organizations are opening up. Some organizations are saying that we'll work at 20% capacity to
Correct.
80% capacity, right? In a situation like that, how do you, from the six E's I'm picking up, how do you
Yeah,
engage with them then?
exactly. So I did mention to you very briefly that people will leave organizations if they do not feel valued enough, if they don't feel that they are making a contribution to the larger purpose of the enterprise, and if that purpose doesn't resonate with them. So I think in that lies the secret to and the answer to your question. Frankly, executives who, especially the senior ones, the ones who've been around in the company much longer, have to find creative ways of making people feel valued. Now, I wouldn't like to say that there's only one way to do this. I think even listening to young executives or young employees who are coming into the company for the first time, listening to their concerns, listening to their aspirations, making sure that one understands why they want to work, understand the kind of work they want to do. I think all those together have to be done, and not only by the senior most executive. No, as I said earlier, also everybody has to play the role of the human resource executive, and your immediate supervisor, your immediate manager, everybody has to make sure that they play this role actively and effectively, because to my mind, Danish, this is going to really enable companies to function cohesively despite the physical distance that's going to become a reality and has already become a reality for many companies that have adopted the hybrid working
Hmm.
methodology.
Hmm, 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 hmm. No, it's an interesting word which you use, that they need to feel valued, right? In your
Exactly.
right in your experience, when leaders come to you, what are the biggest challenges they see, that especially when it says you got to engage with them, you're going to value with them, uh, feel that they are part of the team, they need to be feel empowered, all of that. What's the few challenges which you've seen, and what is the perspective which you see that going forward, this year and the coming years, there must be a chain, or there
Y-
must be a connect with all of them.
Yes, there is no doubt about that. And let's look at the uh, points that we've discussed already once again, and you will see that the big challenge is going to be talent. Today, while companies were impacted by the pandemic, so were each one of us. Now, you may say, in what way were we impacted? We were impacted, Danish, because
Hmm.
every one of us suddenly became aware of the fact that life is short. And a lot of us, everybody, and youngsters especially, they all started to reprioritize their lives. And they said, what are we really doing? What are we working for? Why are we in a rat race? And these questions have given rise to a lot of concerns and issues which companies today need to address. So, talent management, talent engagement, talent retention is going to be a big challenge for leaders going forward. And I think leaders have to be very, very creative in their approach. They also have to make sure that the process of HR is democratized, it's decentralized. The function can no longer be confined to just the HR people. Sorry, that's dead and gone. Today, companies will have to have managers who can engage with others, who can really listen to what others have to say. And out of that listening will emerge ideas on how to deal with talent effectively, how to make sure that uh, you know uh, the problems or the issues are addressed appropriately and in a timely fashion. And part of the talent issue is also the issue of gender diversity. unfortunately and sadly, despite
Mm,
the fact
mm,
that some gains had been made before the pandemic,
mm,
we also saw that the pandemic disproportionately affected women employees in the organization. Many more women quit during the pandemic.
mm,
Now, that could be because of the stresses of working from home. It could be because suddenly the kids weren't going to school and there was a need to pay attention to them. So, if we had made some gains in the time before the pandemic, those gains, I wouldn't say have been completely lost, but a lot of it we've kind of fallen back on them. And the time now has come that even as we manage talent as a homogeneous group, gender diversity will need to be given additional conscious
mm,
attention by leaders. And finally, apart from the talent part and the diversity part in the organizations, I think the third challenge, Danish, will be that there has been a rapid pace of digitization. The
mm,
adoption of digitization by people, which was unimaginable earlier. Every little kirana wala and vegetable vendor who even has a little
mm,
a little shop on the roadside is accepting Google Pay and Paytm and a whole host of the
mm,
bean payments and so on. This is a huge change. And
mm,
even people, customers, are buying a large number of their things online. Now,
mm,
this completely transforms the manner in which traditional brick and mortar companies which manufacture these goods or which create or manage the supply chains from the farmers and so on, the way in which they advertise, the way in which they stock their inventories and so on, all that will change. And
mm.
there is therefore going to be a need for leaders to be aware of that, and they will have to then acquire new ways of dealing with these changes.
So, Bharat, what's the new emerging trend you see out of this?
Okay, first and foremost, leaders will have to be leaders who can engage with people. They can't be aloof. They can't be sitting in some ivory tower somewhere and not talking to people. They can't be those people whom you fear and respect because they're who are to be seen in the distance. I think leaders have to be more down to earth, more kind, more compassionate, more engaging. They have to listen more. They have to be the kind of people who are sufficiently approachable so that even a young junior executive can reach out to them
Wait,
and make
yeah.
sure that they
Okay, so you've
engage.
mentioned that, yeah. So when you mentioned that these guys, like, the leaders are sitting right in their ivory tower, right? And then you're saying that they need to engage. Now, suddenly, okay, this is a challenge for a person who has been in that position for the last 15, 20 years, for example. Suddenly, you're expecting them to behave in a different manner, but human psychology and the behavior doesn't work like that. Now, that's a challenge for the leader then.
Of course. And that's where the boards have to play a key role. If the boards understand that a leader, especially a senior CXO level or an MD level person, does not have these essential skills of engaging with people, of being decisive, of being customer oriented, to understand what's happening, to be action oriented, then the board has to step in and say, hey, I think we can give you a year or two to undergo some training, to get coached or mentored, and then after that we'll take a review. So the boards have to step in. I think the boards can't simply just look at things like compensation without looking at the competencies of the leaders. Now we have to understand that the competencies have to be reviewed as vigorously as the compensation by the compensation subcommittees of boards, because to my mind only
Mm,
those leaders will deliver who have these new competencies
mm,
that we spoke
mm,
about. So
mhm,
boards will have to come in, and people like me who are coaches and mentors, we actually help leaders to step up their game, to step up in their ability to be able to acquire these new competencies that are going to
mm,
assure their success in the coming
mm,
months and
mm.
years.
Is there a framework which they can use? Do they listen to the people who are, or probably somebody who's just joined the organization and they don't have access to that CXO person? How can they listen to them? How can they, like you mentioned in your 6 E's, how
Mm.
will they engage, and how will they empower these new joinees, for example?
So, first of all, this is a very good question, Danish. You have to appreciate that the leader sets the tone, and one of the six E's is also exemplifying through personal action. That means I have got to behave in the manner in which I expect the young executive supervisor to behave as well. So if I listen, the message goes around the organization that look, the boss wants us all to listen to these young people, be sensitive to their concerns, be appreciative of where they're coming from, be sensitive to the kind of work they want to do. So the setting the tone in the organization is the leader's job. And that's where a leader has to be decisive, a leader has to be bold, a leader has to be customer oriented. Now, when I say customer oriented, I don't mean only external customers. Even employees are customers, even the vendors are customers in a sense, because they all expect something from the enterprise. So that kind of an arrangement which the leader initiates, or that kind of a drive that the leader is responsible for, percolates in the organization, and everybody then takes a cue. So, as I said, a new entrant in the organization may not necessarily get to meet the CEO on day one or day two, but if that person's supervisor is able to pay attention, ask the right questions, and find out how the young entrant expects to stay on and grow in the enterprise, that is a huge amount of engagement that is desirable for an early entrant. And that's what will encourage and empower and ultimately make sure that he's completely enlisted in the tasks of the organization.
That was Bharat Wakhlu sharing his insights on leadership in 2022. With over 35 years of experience, Bharat has worked with leaders across industries to help them deal with complex organizational issues. Bring his advisory and mentoring to your business by reaching out to our team at the Outstanding Speakers Bureau. And stay tuned as we bring you more conversations with our global network of experts and thought leaders.